Okay, start the stream.
Just so that we got excellent connection.
Google keeps signing me out today. I am not doing anything to cause it, but it keeps signing me out.
I think it's time Google is crap.
Well, I understand that, but it's never done this before today.
Did we include the Stadia news?
Yes.
Okay.
We might get into that a little bit. Because I've got games on there. Well, my boys got games on there.
Well, they're supposed to let you get all your games and pay you back for all your games and pay you back for any hardware that you purchased from them.
Nobody is ever going to take Google seriously ever again.
I'm surprised anybody took them seriously on this.
Yeah.
Again, that's what they did is where gaming is going to go. We just don't have the infrastructure to support it yet.
Not in this country, no. And if it ain't in the United States, I'm sorry to say, when it comes to gaming, which is interesting because I don't know when the Xbox streaming service, the Xbox Cloud, when that rolled out, but that's a thing, and it actually works. If you use Edge browser, it works on Linux, so you can play all your Xbox games on the cloud on Linux. Nobody's talking
all I
about
can
that.
say is I'm glad I'm not a gamer, so I don't have to even worry about this shit.
I've only got an academic interest in this stuff.
Well, your kids have a more than academic interest.
All right, it's 3:00, so
It is 3:00. Why don't we get going? Audacity ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Joe? Did we lose Joe?
No, you haven't lost me yet, but I'm bringing up Audacity right this second.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a butt ton of Flatpak updates, but they weren't running because I needed to intervene on one of them and say yes or no. So the software manager was doing nothing with it.
Okay, I got Audacity listening to the correct microphone.
All right, 3, 2, 1, record. 3, 2, 1, record. Finally, right at the end, some traffic comes by.
Somebody flushed the toilet upstairs.
Boy, my waveform isn't very loud. Maybe
Mine's not either, I don't think.
Oh well, we can iron that out in the audio mix. Like when George Harrison started the Traveling Wilburys, he called it the Wilburys because he'd always do recording and they'd complain about this mistake or that mistake, and he said, "We'll bury it in the mix." Okay, sync time. 3, 2, 1, 0. Close enough for government work. Are we working for the government now?
No, but I mean, if that's the standard we need to go by, then I can't think of a lower one.
Okay. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 397. This is episode 397.5. Recorded on Sunday, the 2nd of October. I'm Moss.
At least I'm not in Florida. I'm Joe.
Hey, everybody, it's Bill.
First up in the news, monthly mintiness, Gnome gnarliness, and KDEK-ness. Ubuntu 22.10 gets fresh. Ubuntu is now on AWS. Brave blocks consent. Google kills another app. GNU toolchain moves. Matrix patches holes, and new shortcut, new Audacity, and more. In security and privacy, a new virus for Windows and Linux. Then in our wanderings, Joe is fixing bikes on his audio bookshelf. Moss has more classes, and Bill gets Nextcloud running. In our innards section, we talk about how Linux has permeated everything. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. I hope someone plugged in some of the feedback if we had any.
There wasn't any.
Okay. In the news, Linux Mint Monthly from the Linux Mint blog. The code name for Linux Mint 21.1 is Vera. Documentation was written and added to the user guide to cover the following topics: how to reset a forgotten password, how to have Bluetooth disabled at boot, how to make a Windows Live USB stick or a multi-boot USB stick. Blueman was updated to version 2.3.2 in Linux Mint 21. Timeshift 22.06.5 was backported toward Linux Mint 20.x. The changes made to the software sources and the driver manager will be ported towards Linux Mint 21. Following the upstream deprecation of apt-key, the software sources received changes to rework the way it handles PPA keys. A lot of work went into improving the driver manager, including making the manager run in user mode so you no longer need a password to launch it. They made it easier to verify your ISO before writing it to a stick. Right-click your ISO image, select Verify, and voila! Also, the USB stick formatter includes a Verify function. Computer, home, trash, and network icons will, by default, be hidden on the desktop in future releases. Any comments on all this?
Who uses trash anymore anyway?
I do, but that's just me.
Right-click, delete.
I use both. And I've got different purposes for each, but most of the time it's just delete.
Oh,
I
great.
do
My
generally
mute
like
isn't working.
my disks when I connect them to appear on the desktop.
Yeah.
That is helpful.
Interesting. My mute button is not working. Let me check on Video
So
Ninja.
they'll be hidden, but are you going to be able to go into the settings and re-enable them?
It says by default, so you should be able to. It's probably in that little first time boot pop-up that comes up.
Yeah, there are a lot of distros that hide those things, and you're welcome to go in and re-enable them.
Yeah, I don't see that as a huge problem.
Yeah.
Moving
All
on.
right. This Week in Gnome. From This Week in Gnome. Workbench, a sandbox to learn and prototype with GNOME technologies, joined GNOME Circle. Newsflash feed reader was added. I assume that's some kind of just an RSS aggregator of some sort. Kuna, a simple screen recorder with minimal interface, was also added. Gafor, a simple UML and sysml modeling tool, ditto. And several other third-party projects, including a manga reader. So, there you go.
Not really much of interest to talk about there.
Not really.
And we're not mostly GNOME types. So if Norbert were here, we'd be talking for another 20 minutes.
Yeah, probably.
If they had something like that Newsflash, I'm moderately interested in that. Just if it's a nice, clean RSS aggregator that integrates into GNOME, is there a way to integrate that into Cinnamon? Or
yeah, and
Mate?
screen recorders are nice if you're a podcaster.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. This week in KDE. Yo, dog, I heard you wanted stability. This is from Pointy Stick Blog. KDE has slowed down their forward progress and is stressing stability in the next series of Plasma. Kden Live has now adopted Hamburger Menu, so if you turn off its normal menu bar, which remains visible by default, you can still access its full menu structure. If your keyboard has a calculator button, pressing it will now open Calc. The global edit menu toolbar now has a nicer and smoother enter-exit animation. The Plasma media player and notifications plasmoids are now grouped with system services rather than app status indicators, so your app system tray icons will always be together in a group. Without these plasmoids appearing in random positions among them, you can once again switch tabs and kick off the Control Tab shortcut. Now also the standard ones too. Control page up, Control page down, and a couple other controls. The marks you make on the screen using the mouse mark effect now appear in screenshots and screen recordings. On the lock screen, you can now zoom in and out and clear the password field with a semicolonish Control-Alt-U keyboard shortcut. Semi-commonish Control-Alt-U keyboard shortcut. Tooltips throughout Plasma and Qt Quick-based apps now smoothly fade in and out when they appear and disappear. You get tired of that K naming theme from KDE.
That's true, but at least you can identify a KDE app.
know,
That's always been the good thing about the K. You know that it's going to be a KDE app. The other thing is the Hamburger Menu. That tends to be a point of contention among a lot of people, and it's good that it's an option because there are some apps where a Hamburger Menu is a little more appropriate, where you want more screen real estate for the elements that you use a lot, but then just being forced to use a Hamburger Menu is probably not always the best option. I'm not sure if I don't hate them, but there are some places where they just cram everything into a Hamburger Menu, and it seems a little convoluted at that point. You really have to navigate a labyrinth of submenus to find the thing that you want, whereas if they had it sort of laid out in a regular menu, it would have been a lot easier to deal with. But in this case, it looks like Kdenlive is giving it as an option, which is, again, one of the things KDE is good at is giving you the option to move forward. But at the same time, if you like the old way, you can have that too. They don't force any user interface or any huge changes on the user.
Yeah, I don't use Plasma often. It's either in an occasional install of Neon or an occasional install of OpenMandriva, but I'm sure that once these updates get done, it will make it easier to use for me. I found out why my mute button isn't working, and that's because I just reinstalled Mint and I haven't made the mute button switch yet.
Yep, you got to do that.
Okay, Ubuntu 22.10 Kinetic Kudu Beta released with GNOME 43, Linux kernel 5.19 from 9 to 5 Linux. Featuring the latest GNOME 43 desktop environment, Ubuntu 22.10 Beta comes with Pipewire as the default sound system, which is accompanied by WirePlumber as its session and policy manager, GCC 12 as the default system compiler, support for the WebP image format out of the box, as well as updated components and apps. But the most interesting part of this release is the fact that Ubuntu Unity is now available as an official flavor, featuring the good old Unity 7 desktop environment on top of an Ubuntu 22.10 base. Canonical decided to accept Ubuntu Unity as an official flavor starting with Kinetic Kudu release in late October. That was a little redundant. The other official Ubuntu flavors ship with an updated graphical environments too, including KDE Plasma 5.25 for Kubuntu and Ubuntu Studio, XFCE 4.17 for Xubuntu, LXQT 1.1.0 for Lubuntu, Budgie 10.6.2 for Ubuntu Budgie, Mate 1.28 for Ubuntu Mate, and UKUI 3.1 for Ubuntu Chillin. Under the hood, Ubuntu 22.10 Beta is powered by Linux kernel 5.19, which features support for AMD's secure nested paging feature, initial support for Lungsun's Lung Arch RISC ISA CPU architecture, support for Z-standard compressed firmware files, support for the ARM Scalable Matrix extension, SME, and many other changes. As mentioned before, Ubuntu 22.10 will hit the streets on October 20th, 2022. Until then, you can take the beta version out for a spin on your personal computer by downloading the live ISO images from the official website, where you'll also find beta versions of the Kubuntu, Xubuntu, Lubuntu, Ubuntu Studio, Ubuntu Budgie, Ubuntu Unity, Ubuntu Mate, and Ubuntu Chillin official flavors. Are we excited for Ubuntu?
I want to be.
Eh.
I'm excited about Unity. I mean, the fact
Yeah,
that
I
we're
think
just
we've
calling it
talked a lot
Ubuntu
about that.
Unity, yeah, it's not Ubuntu Unity Remix anymore. It's Ubuntu Unity, and that is, I mean, if somebody would have said back in the 15 dot whatever days that we would be experiencing something like this now, you know, people would have thought you were nuts. But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm not gonna update any of my production machines to it, but I'll probably run it in a couple of virtual machines, especially the Unity edition, because that's the first official version, if I'm correct. That's going to be the first blessed version of Ubuntu Unity, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll probably do what I normally do and ignore Ubuntu.
I mean, you know, the things, anybody that's using a derivative of YouTube, or I about said YouTube, Ubuntu, you know, these things, they kind of matter. It's just not, you know, Linux has just become
Changes in the
something.
base matter a lot.
It does matter a lot, but we've grown into this expectation of everything just working now, and as a result, there's less drama, and I don't know, maybe that's taken away from the spectacular nature
Yeah,
of.
well, I do pay attention to Ubuntu when it actually has something that comes downstream that has some kind of impact on Mint. GNOME 43 is not going to have an impact on Mint.
No.
Now, when snaps became a norm with Ubuntu, that did impact Mint, so I did keep track of that. But really, the rest of it,
Well, we are using Mutter now, right? So, as Mutter sort of evolves into something that works just perfectly with Wayland, you know, and then we start to migrate over. That might be interesting. It's not really interesting to me because I just want it to work, and as such, I'm not even using Wayland yet because I don't want to futz around with OBS.
I guess the other thing that I'll keep track on this will be Pipewire.
Pipewire, yeah.
Yeah, see how that impacts.
So
And see whether Clem goes with it in the next version.
It probably will. I mean, Pipewire is probably something that should have happened a while ago.
So are we not using Pipewire in Mint 21 here, or
No, I don't think so. I think it's still
because it pulled Pipewire.
Pulse Audio and what's the other one?
I had to install Pipewire Pulse in order to get Audacity working on this thing. So I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Ubuntu is now available on AWS, and this is from TechRadar Pro. And what did Londoner? Is he the contributor on this? Okay, so Ubuntu Workspaces on AWS, a fully managed virtual desktop infrastructure (VDI), is now generally available on the public cloud platform. This marks the first time that a virtual Linux OS desktop has been available on AWS, which has previously only offered iOS and Windows operating systems. Wow, thank God.
Well, it's a move in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean,
considering about 80% of tongue isn't working. About 80% of AWS is Linux anyhow. They should have done this a long time ago.
So this is, to be clear, this is if you was to build a cloud-based desktop application. This is what this would be for. We've already had cloud-based server Linux on AWS. This is just desktop. Am I right in that?
Now, I don't work with AWS a lot, but this sounds like it's the first time that out of the box, a desktop has been offered, a virtual desktop has been offered. But if Linux was on there previously, it doesn't really matter what version, then you could have just, installed a desktop and installed a way to view it. Either RDP or X2Go or just VNC. So, I mean, you could have set it up on your own, but it is nice to have something that's built in.
I'm not sure. I use cloud-based machines, but it's always server-based. I'm not sure what the use case is for this, but I'm sure that there is a lot of use cases where this would be useful. But yeah, cool. One step closer to full world domination.
Well, just setting up a thin client and being able to use it, essentially from anywhere, and maybe having more power than whatever device you have on the road.
I know people that do run servers, but they've got desktops installed on them. That way they're just not comfortable with completely administering the thing from a terminal. So
okay, Joe.
Okay. Brave browser to start blocking annoying cookie consent banners. Finally. From Bleeping Computer, the Brave browser will soon allow users to block annoying and potentially privacy-harming cookie consent banners on all websites they visit. If you visited Bleeping Computer from Europe, you may have noticed an annoying cookie consent prompt asking if you would like to accept data collecting cookies from our advertisers. These notifications are incredibly annoying, but have become necessary to do business online to comply with data protection regulations like GDPR. In some cases, however, these banners can serve as trackers themselves as they engage in a privacy-breaching data exchange before the user even has a chance to opt out. Secondly, it is widely accepted that the consent prompts severely disrupt the browsing experience, as users have to deal with them almost every time they visit a website. Brave will now proactively detect and block the cookie consent banners to deal with both of these issues, removing both a distraction and a potential privacy risk for users. The rollout of the new system has already started in Brave Nightly and is scheduled to reach the stable branch on version 1.45 in October, starting with Windows and Android. iOS will follow soon afterwards.
Now, I hope Firefox is working on this.
Yeah, well, I hope all browsers are working on this, because it does get annoying after a while saying, no, I don't want cookies. Or
Google doesn't care. Why would they put it in Chrome?
Yeah.
I've been using that I don't care about cookies extension for some time, and that seems to work just fine. There's some news about that, though. Somebody bought that for a ridiculous amount of money, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
That's all there really is to say about that.
All right. Google is shutting down Stadia. Are we surprised?
Oh, God, no.
From The Verge.
Not at all.
Google is shutting down Stadia, its cloud gaming service. The service will remain live for players until January 18th, 2023. Google will be refunding all Stadia hardware purchased through the Google Store, as well as all the games and add-on content purchased from the Stadia Store. Google expects those refunds will be completed in mid-January. Quote, a few years ago, we also launched a consumer gaming service, Stadia. End quote, Stadia Vice President and GM Phil Harrison said in a blog post. Quote, and while Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technology foundation, it hasn't gained the traction with users that we've expected. So we've made the difficult decision to begin winding down our Stadia streaming service, end quote. Employees on the Stadia team will be distributed to other parts of the company. Harrison says Google sees opportunities to apply Stadia's technology to other parts of Google, like YouTube, Google Play, and its AR efforts. And the company also plans to make it available to our industry partners, which aligns with where we see the future of gaming headed, end quote, he wrote. Google detailed some of the finer points of the shutdown in an FAQ. Refunds will automatically be made through the Google and Stadia stores, and you won't have to return any hardware. Stadia Pro subscriptions will not be eligible for a refund, but you will not be charged during the shutdown period and can access games you might have redeemed as a Pro user until everything is wound down. Google has closed the Stadia store, so you can't buy games or in-game transactions. The writing has been on the wall for Stadia for a while now, most recently when Logitech announced its new cloud gaming handheld last week, and Stadia was one of the few cloud gaming services not mentioned. But Stadia has been facing rumors of its demise practically from the start. Google has a habit of killing projects only a few years after they launch, and Stadia, a cloud gaming service from a company with few ties in the gaming industry, seemed like a prime candidate for an early demise.
Yeah, it sucks that Stadia is closing down. I never bought into it, mostly because I expected this to happen, and I don't have a whole lot of time for gaming anymore. But I mean, the people that have had the service are going to make out pretty well. They're basically getting the hardware that they purchased for free. They're getting all of their games refunded. You can't really complain about that. Now, hopefully, they're getting the full price and not the current price. So, hopefully, they're getting the price that they paid, and they can go somewhere else and buy the same game again. But I really don't see how this is a loss for the people that used Stadia.
Yep, the only thing Google is keeping is subscription revenue.
Yep.
I'm wondering what'll end up like. I got one of those. They early on, if you bought a copy of what was it, the big game that came out, Cyberpunk, they sent you a free what was a game controller, a Stadia game controller, and a Chromecast Ultra. So I wonder how they'll handle things like that. Presumably I won't get any money for that, but that Chromecast Ultra was $100 device by itself. So I've already not lost any money, but I'm curious as to how they'll handle stuff like that. Presumably they won't at all, but yeah, I think that's the only game I've ever actually bought outright. The kids were
Did you
using
play Cyberpunk?
I bought it for the kids to play,
Ah.
and my son, the oldest of my replacement kids, like went upstairs at 3:00, came back downstairs at like 9:00, said he beat it. So I don't know.
Well, I
These
heard
kids are
that
monsters.
when it first came out, it was excessively glitchy.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, if you got your game on a cloud platform and you need to push updates to it, that was the cool thing about this, was you just open the browser and play, or you start up the Chromecast. That was the Ultra had the Stadia kind of built into it. If you turned on the Stadia controller, it would just take the Chromecast and go directly to your Stadia interface and play the games, and you didn't have that long update process that you do with the consoles. There was a lot of advantages to it. There really was.
yeah.
The problem just is internet infrastructure.
That
And
Stadia controller, does it work with other devices?
I have not played with it. I'm hoping it does, because in order to, presumably, if it connects to a Chromecast, it's got to be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or something. I wouldn't think they'd go with anything strange and proprietary, but I'm gonna play around with that when I get time, and then I'll mention that on a future episode. So watch this space. I think that would be useful if it does, because it is a fairly solid controller. It's more akin to the PlayStation controller in terms of size and the layout of the controls and that. So it's a little smaller, than the Xbox controller, but I mean, we got it for free, and the Chromecast will stay working. You know, still somewhat of a value,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Do you use the Chromecast? I mean, most of your TVs these days are smart TVs.
They're really
So-
not. Those apps on those smart TVs are junk. We stopped relying on them because it was every other day I was getting a phone call. Hey, there was an update and need to sign back into this silly app, and I just
I've
got
had that
sick of it.
problem.
Well, the old Vizio I had was having that problem, and then the old Samsung did too. So we ended up going. The TV in the living room is Samsung, and then we bought a NVIDIA Shield for that, and the NVIDIA Shield is just a flawless device. And then the TVs the kids are using are they both have Fire TV built in.
Hmm.
And I mean, and that is what it is. It's about the same performance you would expect from a Fire Stick, except it's literally built right into the TV.
I guess my TV is only, I think, 2-3 years old at this point. So,
Yeah.
and it's a Roku TV, but eventually one day it'll quit getting updates or something silly like that, and then I'll have to hook something up to it.
Okay, yeah, those
Well-
ones that got the Roku built in, just like the Fire TVs, that's actually you're getting an actual Android plus Roku or plus, Amazon experience. You got some of these like the Samsungs, they've all got their like third party thing going on, and those apps are not always made by the same developers that make the Android apps, because it is an Android. It's like a Minix type based thing that
Well, I intentionally have a stupid TV and I do all my streaming via browser.
that's what I want. I want a stupid TV that's 60
it's
inches
difficult.
wide.
Yeah, it's difficult to buy modern TVs that are stupid.
I know.
Can you disable
really
the smartness at all?
Yes, you can. You don't have to
Just
use
not
the
use
smart-
it.
Yeah, you just hook up to the HDMI and that's it.
And that's exactly what we do.
You don't ever have to
Okay.
connect it to Wi-Fi if you don't want to.
Well, what's the next story, Bill?
Okay. GNU toolchain plans move to the Linux Foundation's infrastructure. This is from Phoronix. The GCC compiler and related GNU toolchain infrastructure has long been hosted by sourceware.org, that has been sponsored by Red Hat the past 2 decades. But now the GNU toolchain infrastructure, GTI, project is being established as it works to leverage Linux Foundation's IT services to provide more robust and secure infrastructure for these critical open source projects.
That was quite a sentence there.
I know, I had to really tighten the lips.
Yeah.
With the Linux Foundation IT services doing a stellar job hosting kernel.org and related web server infrastructure for the Linux kernel, the various parties involved in the GNU toolchain have been sorting out a similar setup. I heard about this on Linux Action News, and I was a little puzzled as to what is the real reason for a move like this.
Yeah, they said that it actually angered some of their contributors.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a real good reason, like they were shutting down the technology that was being used, but from what it just appears as though GNU just doesn't want their stuff on Red Hat's infrastructure anymore. It's just
I think Red Hat has decided that they aren't going to supply enough funding to Sourceware for the projects that they have in mind.
Okay. Well, there you go.
And Linux Foundation has more money to throw around.
Well, let's just hope that this turns out to be a positive change for everybody that's involved. We do in the Linux world still lean on the GNU toolchain pretty heavily,
Okay, moving on. Upgrade now to address E2EE vulnerabilities in Matrix JS SDK, Matrix iOS SDK, and Matrix Android SDK 2. This is from Matrix blog. 2 critical severity vulnerabilities in end-to-end encryption were found in the SDKs which power Element, Beeper, Cine, ShieldyChat, Circuli, Synod IM, and any other clients based on Matrix JS SDK, Matrix iOS SDK, or Matrix Android SDK 2. These have now been fixed, and we have not seen evidence of them being exploited in the wild. All of the critical vulnerabilities require cooperation from a malicious home server to be exploited. Please upgrade immediately in order to be protected against these vulnerabilities. Clients with other encryption implementations, including Hydrogen, Element X, Nico, Fluffy Chat, Siphon, Timmy, Gomux, and Pantalaimon, are not affected. This is not a protocol bug. Matrix has an outgoing series of public independent audits booked to help guard against future vulnerabilities. We will also be making some protocol changes in the future to provide additional layers of protection. This resolves the pre-disclosure issued on September 23rd. Okay, so there was a security vulnerability, but now it's fixed. Keep your stuff updated. Patch your stuff.
Right. Okay, Shotcut 22.09 video editor adds initial support for WebP animations and new video filters from 9 to 5 Linux. Shotcut 22.09 is here 3 months after Shotcut 22.06, the last stable release of the software, and introduces initial support for reading WebP animations, 2 new video filters, fisheye and GPS graphic, snapping to the playhead to keyframes, and the ability to display audio clips without album art. Also new in this release is the GoPro 2 GPX utility that lets you export a GPX file from a GoPro video via Properties, Export GPX, a new reset option in settings to help you reset all the settings, including the hidden ones, as well as new alpha operation, reverse, and invert parameters to the mask draw video filter. Another interesting change in Shotcut 2209 is the ability to drag, scroll, /pan by pressing the middle mouse button on the keyframes, timeline, and the built-in player when zoomed in. Moreover, the new Shotcut version adds an actions and shortcuts entry in the help menu to provide users with a unified action search and shortcut editor, and also replace the old keyboard shortcuts menu item. On top of all that, Shotcut 22.09 improves support for custom video transitions by implementing a quick preview to transition properties and a favorite button in the transition properties and the mask from file video filter, along with the ability to list all the files in the transitions folder in the transition properties, the mask from file video folder, and the slideshow generator dialog. Also improved is the filters picker, which gained support for a small animated icon and translatable keywords to facilitate search. Various bugs were addressed to improve the move track up or move track down functions, old film scratches video filter, file OpenMLT XML as a clip menu item, text rich filter, and other functionality. Also worth mentioning is the fact that the new Shotcut release deprecates and hides the lens correction video filter due to its low quality and the introduction of the fisheye video filter. You can read the full release notes on the project's GitHub page for more details on these changes. Under the hood, Shotcut 22.09 is bundled with FFmpeg 5.1, David 1.0 AV1 decoder, AOM 3.4.0 AV1 encoder, LibVPX 1.12.0 VP8/9 encoder, VMAF 2.3.1 video quality assessment algorithm, and GlaxNimate 0.5.1 SVG software.
There's some tongue twisters for you.
You betcha. You did good.
Now,
Thank
do
you very
any
much.
of us?
I'll be
do
here
any of
all
us-
week.
Yep. Do any of us use Shotcut?
I was just going to say, admittedly, I've never even heard of this, but after going and looking at the website and then taking a good look at the, the picture on the front page here, it looks an awful like OpenShot. Does anybody know, is one based on the other, or they just happen to look that way?
Well, I don't know. Why don't I try?
But this looks, I mean, it almost kind of even looks like a middle ground between OpenShot and Kdenlive in some way. It looks a little bit more robust than OpenShot. But
If I've needed to do any video editing, I use Kdenlive. So I don't know. Not the most robust, but
I mean, Kdenlive has got enough in it to bewilder me when I go. Most of the time, everything I need to do, I can do with OpenShot, and that's seen a lot of forward moving.
Well, there's a lot of discussion in Google on what's better and which to choose, and of course, they're all coming before the current version of Shotcut.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that for all the projects like this, usable software that's open source,
right,
and available on Linux. So,
okay.
All right, let's move on to Audacity, another piece of multimedia software that we rely on heavily. Audacity 3.2 released with real-time VST3 effects, FFmpeg 5.0, and WavePack support. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. Audacity 3.2 is almost here, and I think as of date, it is here. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. I have it.
After the Audacity 3.1 series, and it introduces several existing new features like real-time effects for the audio units, LAD, SPA, LV2, and VST3 plugins, support for VST3 effects, support for the WavePack open audio compression format, as well as support for the latest FFmpeg 5.0 multimedia framework. As part of the new real-time effects feature, Audacity 3.2 adds a new effects button to the tracks menu to allow you to place real-time effects. In addition, the effects menu received a new sorting, and you'll now find other sorting and grouping options in the effects preferences. Here's the real-time effects feature in action. The UI received various changes as well, such as the merge of the mixer bar with the meter bars, a quick audio sharing feature, and new audio setup button by default that replaces the device toolbar. You'll still be able to re-add the device toolbar via the View Toolbars menu. Among other noteworthy changes, Audacity can now be compiled without jack support on GNU/Linux systems. MPEG 123 or MPG 123 is now used as the default MP3 importer instead of MAD. There's support for XDG directories on GNU/Linux systems, and plugins are now automatically scanned, tested, and enabled when Audacity starts. Of course, Audacity 3.2 also fixes various issues to improve M4A, AAC support to let you set the bit rate between 98 and 160 kilobytes per second for mono and between 196 and 320 kilobytes per second for stereo. Importing MP3 files, batch processing, GTK packaging in app images. There's a big one. Audacity's license was updated as well as part of the major release for VST3 support, such as the Audacity binaries are now licensed under the GNU General Public License version 3, while most of the code files remain under GPL version 2 or later. This is a huge update. I haven't updated to it yet from what I've heard from other users, it almost warrants a new major version number, which was why I was kind of surprised when 3.1 came out that this stuff, it must just not have been ready.
Well, I'm using it now, and it's a different thing from. I think the last version I used was 2.4.2.
Yeah.
And it's a big difference.
There was a lot of change. Well, I'm running 3.1.3 right now, and that's enough of a big change because they did away with the time shift button, and now that's just sort of incorporated into the top of the waveform. You just grab the waveform and just move it back and forth, which means you can leave the select button on and just you have the functionality of both without switching back and forth. So I can see the usefulness in that. I can also see how that's going to take some time for a lot of people that have been using Audacity for a long time to get used to. But I mean, the real-time effects feature, though, I've not had a chance to play with it yet, but it seems like a feature that serious users had been asking for a long time, and I can see, from what I understand, it'll be really useful for people that just use the same features or the same effects on every project that they do. They can just apply those effects right there as they're recording or as they're working, without having to go through and select the track that you're working on and then apply the effect to it. It's actually being applied in real time. So, I mean, it's pretty major. This puts I've heard it said that it puts Audacity up there on the level as many of your more professional audio workstations that are out there.
Yeah, I'm going to have a learning process figuring out how to save the show file today.
Yeah, we'll see.
You guys are talking about it being on like 3.2. I just looked at my version number for Audacity, and I'm at like 2.3.
I used 2.3.2 on a few systems I got. The latest I've used, however, is 2.4.2.
You would have to use the Flatpak to get it, the updated one. So,
okay, well, that wraps up our news. Why don't we move on to security and privacy?
Never before seen malware has infected hundreds of Linux and Windows devices. This is from Ars Technica. Researchers have revealed a never before seen piece of cross platform malware that has infected a wide range of Linux and Windows devices, including small office routers, FreeBSD boxes, and large enterprise servers. Black Lotus Labs, the research arm of security firm Lumen, is calling the malware Chaos, a word that repeatedly appears in function names, certificates, and file names it uses. Chaos emerged no later than April 16th, when the first cluster of control servers went live in the wild. From June through mid-July, researchers found hundreds of unique IP addresses representing compromised Chaos devices. Staging servers used to infect new devices have mushroomed in recent months, growing from 39 in May to 93 in August. As of Tuesday, the number reached 111. Black Lotus has observed interactions with these staging servers from both embedded Linux devices as well as enterprise servers, including one in Europe that was hosting an instance of GitLab. There are more than 100 unique samples in the wild. The potency of the Chaos malware stems from a few factors, Black Lotus Labs researchers wrote in a Wednesday morning blog post. First, it is designed to work across several architectures, including ARM, Intel i386, MIPS, and PowerPC. In addition to both Windows and Linux operating systems, second, unlike large-scale ransomware distribution botnets like Emotet that leverage spam to spread and grow, Chaos propagates through known CVEs and brute forced as well as stolen SSH keys. CVEs refer to the mechanism used to track specific vulnerability. Wednesday's report referred to only a few, including CVE 2017-17-215 and CVE 2022-305-525, affecting firewalls sold by Huawei, and CVE 2022-1388, an extremely severe vulnerability in load balancers, firewalls, and network inspection gear sold by F5. SSH infections using password brute forcing and stolen keys also allow chaos to spread from machine to machine inside an infected network. Chaos also has various capabilities, including enumerating all devices connected to an infected network, running remote shells that allow trackers to execute commands, and loading additional modules. Combined with the ability to run on such a wide range of devices, these capabilities have led Black Lotus Labs to suspect Chaos is the work of a cybercriminal actor that is cultivating a network of infected devices to leverage for initial access, DDoS attacks, and crypto mining. Company researchers said. Black Lotus Labs believes Chaos is an offshoot of Kaiji, a piece of botnet software for Linux-based AMD and i386 servers for performing DDoS attacks. Since coming into its own, Chaos has gained a host of new features, including modules for new architectures, the ability to run on Windows, and the ability to spread through vulnerability exploitation and SSH key harvesting. Infected IP addresses indicate that chaos infections are most heavily concentrated in Europe, with smaller hotspots in North and South America and Asia Pacific. Well, that's interesting. I mean, wow, somebody's out there doing a lot of development to make it that cross-platform. They should be working for someone making a crap ton of money.
Well, maybe they intend to make a crap ton of money.
Yeah. I mean, their best bet. The DDoS attacks, I don't think will profit them much, but if they were to use all of these infected systems and start crypto mining, that could be very profitable for them. I don't know. And it just seems like a brilliant person used their powers for evil.
Unfortunately.
Well, that about ends our security for this episode. Well, let's move on. Biweekly maunderings. Well, I've been really busy with school. I've had 3 work days in just these 2 weeks. I go home and I'm too dead to do anything else for 2 days. One of those days was 6th grade math and science, and they actually had me teaching, not just keeping the class in tow while they did pre-assigned stuff. Before you start shedding alligator tears for me, remember that I'm almost 70 years old and have a large variety of health issues, as is normal for old men. Thursday was the 6th anniversary of my wife getting off the plane from Canada. She hasn't killed me yet. We celebrated one of those 2 events.
She's missed you with every bullet so far.
Yeah. At
But
least
with
I know
every
she
miss,
misses
she
me.
gets a little bit better, gets a little closer.
At least I know she misses me. I have regressed both laptops and my studio desktop to Mint 20.3. There have been just enough tiny glitches and issues to make me yearn for the good old days of Una, so here I am. It does not make much sense to revert my wife's laptop or the TV box at present, so I will wait on that until it does. Distro Hoppers Digest 36 is out. This was the first episode we did after Tony has moved to emeritus status. It's just me, Dale, and Josh Hawk now. It was a good show. We also have 2 episodes with over 1,000 views. Never thought it would get here. We're averaging over 850 downloads per episode, all stats thanks to archive.org. My 77th Full Circle Weekly News was released today. It's number 281. Thanks to Leo for passing that job on to me. And that's about it for me. Comments?
Well done on Full Circle, by the way.
How are you enjoying the subbing?
Yeah.
The high school sub, it depends on what class I have. The English class, I've been in this one English class 3 times now. And there are definitely people in there that come in saying, oh, wow, you're my favorite sub. There's 1 or 2 that say, you're already better than Mrs. Rogers.
Ouch.
That
you heard it here, folks.
Anyhow, it's for the most part fun.
As long as when you're subbing, you're plugging mintCast, doing it right.
These kids all have Chromebooks, and they do not even know the name of their operating system.
Yikes.
You should correct that.
Now,
Immediately.
mind you, we have mentioned a certain friend of mine who just turned 13 and is now a full Ubuntu member with his distro being made full status in October.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
You should just take over that
fantastic news.
English class and just give a dissertation on Linux.
Well, they haven't put me in the computer lab yet.
Like I said, take over the English class and just give a dissertation on Linux. Tell them we don't have much to go over today since I'm subbing. So
Well,
today we're going to talk
the
about Linux. Here's your assignment.
Mrs. Rogers has been very good about having well-planned lessons already there for me to do, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
There have been some classes I go into where they just expect that the students aren't going to learn anything anyhow, so
Yeah,
why do
no,
anything?
I subbed for a while, like 10 years ago, and one, I absolutely hated it. Two, yeah, the teachers, I never really had one that left a lesson plan. It was basically I was there to babysit for an hour. Yeah.
Well, one of my 3 subbing jobs in the last 2 weeks was a 6th grade math and science, and I was amazed. He did have a good lesson plan, but he expected me to teach it, and that's the first time in all my subbing I've been expected to teach the class. So that was exciting and scary and all those things.
Just as long as you started out with, okay, have you guys subscribed to mintCast yet?
Well, if you guys
I
really like
actually-
me,
I-
you can get more
I
of me on
actually
mintCast.
have picked up some subscribers on my YouTube page.
Oh, cool, cool.
Cool
Okay,
beans.
well, I have not gotten a lot done in the last few weeks, and you know, I kind of looked down and then looked back up, and 2 weeks had kind of blown by. A lot of that was because work was insanely busy. I mean, um, my manager at work, his wife is extremely ill and in Boston, so he's been bouncing back and forth between Boston and Texas, and now his wife is in the hospital, so he's in Boston and I'm doing his job. If anybody else is out, I'm doing their job. There was one day where I worked like 15 hours straight on one issue, on one phone call, and did not get time to do anything else. And that's a whole nother story. And it was completely miserable. And let me tell you, after 15 hours of grinding away at something, you are done. You are tired and you just want to go to bed. But other than that, I did have a lot of problems with my bike, and that I needed to fix. I have 2 bikes that I go between as one breaks, and I fix the other. So the bike that I had been using recently got a flat back tire. You know, not a big deal. So I replaced the inner tube, and then when I remounted the tire, I couldn't get it to sit straight. I got out my truing tool and went looking, and what I found was 2 broken spokes. Um, so there isn't a whole lot you can do about that except buy more spokes and replace them. I'm not quite sure on the millimeter size yet, but I will be finding out. So I put that bike away for now and got out the other one. This is the one where I replaced the rear wheel, as the old one had similar issues with spokes and was so bent that it couldn't really be used. So you could not true it. I found out that the rear tube on that one also had a hole in it, so I replaced that as well. It also needed cable replacement for the front shifter, which had rusted up and just wouldn't move anymore. I had not done one of those before, but it turned out to be pretty easy. I was able to get a good ride out of that bike, but then the next day, the brand new tube in the rear tire was flat again. That was a bit disheartening, but the leak was slow enough that I could fill up the tire and get 10 miles in. But then the next time I filled up the tire, it wouldn't hold any air at all. So I replaced it again, and after mounting it to the bike, first thing that happens after I fill it up is a pop hiss, and I had to replace it again. I checked very closely, but there was nothing inside the wheel or on the rim that would cause the issue, and it looked like my brand new tire or my brand new inner tube just had some dry rot, and so on goes another tube. That one has worked so far, but man, it was a pain in the butt to get the bikes moving again. And now I still need to try and order some spokes and get those other 2 wheels fixed. But at least it's something I haven't done before, so I am learning something new doing it. And yeah, it's stressful, but it's also enjoyable. Now, last show I talked about an application called Audio Bookshelf. I'd only been using it for about a day at that point, and I hadn't had much of a chance to, give an informed review. So now that's what I'm going to do. I've liked using it so far. I haven't had any issues with transitioning from Wi-Fi to data, and I have made sure to do a bit of moving around town, and it has worked perfectly. It buffers enough that no issues have come up. I know that that will change if I go to a dead zone, but as long as I plan ahead, I can download the entire book and avoid that issue. It did take me a while to go through my entire collection of books and get the naming conventions properly sorted so that Audio Bookshelf would read them correctly. And I'm certain that I'll keep finding some that will need further correction, but so far, so good. Only once after putting in the corrections did a series of books not show up, and I had to go in and because everything looked correct, I had to go in and change the name of the author by adding like a one on the end or something, and then letting it pick it up that way, and then changing it back again, and then it picked up the entire series, put it in the proper order, and everything worked just fine. Now, my only real complaint with the application is that the Android app doesn't have a widget. I have to go in and find the application every time. I have created a shortcut, but it's not the same as being able to see all the stats from the main screen of my phone. And I'd love to be able to replace the one for, what is it, Listen Audiobook Player. I also like that I can easily switch between devices and pick up right where I left off because it's that server client model instead of downloading everything to the device using BT Sync and using it that way. I just use the server. I can just go to that page and kick off if I want to. My back and shoulder are starting to heal up, and I'm glad I took things a little easier for a while. But I'm really ready to start lifting heavy again. I will take things slow and build back up, but I miss the bench press and I miss heavy curls. I'm also looking for a better way to track my overall progress, and I'm looking for an open source application that'll help do that job. Let me know if anyone has any suggestions on what I could use there. I have not progressed on my next custom Bluetooth headset adventures, but I am waiting on some cables to show up from China. I do have enough to get started and should be doing the measuring and designing. I just keep getting busy. Um, I did find my USB controllers that I can use with with the Batacera build that I have on the 1GX. And I've also ordered a set of Razer Jungle Cat controllers, which I should be able to use with the 1GX and on my cell phone. But I will need to design some adapters for the mounting system for both the phone and the laptop. And I'll tell you about that next time. Well, hopefully next time I'll have it set up, but I should have received it by then, and I'll be able to pull this off and hopefully attach the Razer Jungle Cats to the sides of this little laptop. And then also, because it was made for older phones, I'll have to make adapters so that my phone and the case will be able to slide the controls on there. They are Bluetooth, so there will be some latency, and that's a thing all on its own. But I wanted something that I could use on both, and most of the ones without latency are all USB-C and mount directly to a phone. So the Razer Jungle Cat, yes, it's older, but I think for my use case, it's going to be the best bet. That's really all I've been up to. Unless you guys got anything you want to add or questions. On to you, Bill.
Well, the only thing I've accomplished this last fortnight, aside from work, has been the migration of the mintCast Nextcloud server from my Rock Pro 64 to a proper x86 machine. A few weeks ago, with Moss's guidance, I ordered and received a ThinkCenter M93 complete with a 4th gen i7. I added 32 gigabytes of ECC RAM, again with Moss's guidance, because apparently I just am incapable of buying RAM. an SSD, a Samsung SSD, and the two 2 terabyte Iron Wolf NAS drives that held the data directory that was being used in the Rock Pro for the Nextcloud installation that I had at the time. This is where the problems came full circle. The main reason I lamented and subsequently switched from the ARM-based Pine 64 system is because at several times while having the 2 NAS drives installed, the system returned I/O errors and even returned some errors about some corruption going on with the mirrored copy. And it was always the second drive, SDB. What I had going on was just a ZFS. Well, in the beginning, I had a ButterFS mirror, and it fouled out the second drive, or it corrupted the second drive. I didn't know about it for 2 weeks. I still had a working copy because it was a mirror, like a software RAID mirror. And at the time I blamed it on ButterFS, so I switched over to ZFS, and it was a bit of a better experience, but at a couple of points over the last year or so, I was getting errors on the ZFS side as well too, and it was always on SDB. The thing about ZFS is when you have errors, ZFS will fix those errors a little bit more automatically, a little bit more intelligently, and you have to worry about it a little less. At the time, I blamed the problem on a combination of, the dodgy support, perceived dodgy support on the ARM platform, as well as a lack of ECC RAM, which is highly recommended when using ZFS due to its high dependence on memory caching. Which means, if I understand it correctly, and somebody might write in and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the default setup with ZFS, it does an awful lot of caching to the memory before it does any writes. It's another copy on write file system, but it just relies on the memory that much more to be more performant, I suppose. And if you have errors to the data while it's sitting in memory, it'll write the wrong stuff to the hard drive, and you won't know that you've got any data problems because you're writing the data that the file system received from memory. That's a lot of detail, but I mean it relies on ECC a little bit more than anything else does, because ECC memory has a little bit more, stands for error correcting code, by the way. It's one more chip on the memory stick that applies a little bit of checksumming before it actually gets written to the disk. So you've got that much more data integrity checks going on before it actually gets written. But ZFS relies on the memory more than anything else. Well, I found that after attaching the drives to the Think Center, I was getting the exact same errors after setting up another Z pool and, basically doing the things the same way as I was before. And it was the exact same thing, the same drive. So I thought maybe I've just got a bad drive. So I ran a smart test, and it was doing fine until about halfway through. It started giving me IO errors. And then I did a bad blocks test, and it did the exact same thing. So at this point, I'm thinking that it's a controller issue. That's at that point, I decided to remove the drive and just create a storage pool on the single drive. Replace the bad drive and add the new drive to the pool as a mirrored device later after I receive a replacement. This is actually relatively easy to do with ZFS, because you just you create the pool on the one drive, and then later on you can create the same pool on the other. you create the same pool on the other drive, and then you attach it to that mirrored pool, and then it does what it calls resilvering, where it basically just kind of incorporates it into the storage pool, and now you've got some RAID going on. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's really not that difficult. I see now that perhaps I was wrong to blame the problem on the Rock Pro, but I'm still not convinced the device didn't somehow cause the controller to fail in the drive. I say this because the Iron Wolf has an excellent track record for reliability in the server NAS storage space. And I also have 3 12-terabyte Iron Wolves running in that Jellyfin server, and that's been chugging away for 2 years without a single error, not even the smallest little error. And it does a scrub once a week. So, I'm kind of giving Seagate and the Iron Wolf line a little bit more leeway, a little bit more rope than I am the Rock Pro, and that might not be fair, but these Rock Pros are kind of marketed as project devices. They're not really meant to be consumer grade or even business grade devices to be relied on for important infrastructure. They're really just marketed, and the software that goes on them is sort of marketed as project grade type stuff, So whether it's fair or not, I'm kind of leaning towards Seagate a little more. There's just no way to know for sure what caused the failure, so I'll just replace the drive and move on. Happily, the drive is still covered under warranty. Getting that process rolling was relatively simple matter of going to the Seagate website, creating an account, and then creating a return ticket. They emailed me the packing label and then all the instructions and everything. The only thing is I have to pay for the postage to send this thing back to them, and then they'll send me a replacement as soon as they receive it, which seems to be about the normal way of doing things. I'll comment further on that as soon as I get the replacement and then add it to the system. I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to get to the post office to send that thing off. All in all, though, I am pleased with the performance of Nextcloud on the Think Center. One can definitely sense a boost in speed and reliability on a proper Intel platform. The 4th gen i7 might be a little long in the tooth, relatively speaking, but it plows through the server workload given by Nextcloud on an Apache-based server. Where it's going to matter more than anything else is not just the cloud storage, but there's other things to Nextcloud, like there's a document server on there that works sort of the same way as Google Docs. It's got a fairly reliable, I've not had a problem with it, a reliable way of managing documents and everything from presentations to spreadsheets. I've not tried the spreadsheet thing yet, but it seems to be as far as I'm concerned, a drop-in replacement for Google Drive, which is exactly what I was looking for. You've also got a photo viewer, and then it's got Nextcloud has a huge add-on, community-based and project-based add-on community, and a lot of the add-ons are really useful. Everything from, you can run your calendar and back up your contacts and everything to that, which is what I do. The Android and Linux desktop clients that connect to it and do all the syncing, they work fantastic, and I've never had a problem. It's not necessarily as brain dead easy as just running everything on Google, but then again, you don't have to worry about Nextcloud sending your pictures off to the police and accusing you of being a child pornography pusher either,
I really look forward to getting a chance to use this. I will keep pushing for its use until we are up and running with it.
Yeah, I think I will probably start the peer pressure once I've got the other drive installed, and then
We
I
can
get
wait for that.
yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's probably perfectly usable right now. I just would like to see it run for a month or two, just doing what I do with it. And then if the other guys want to play with it, they've also got accounts that they can get on. And there's even a little bit of
We will need some kind of redundancy.
yeah. I mean, with ZFS, you've got cold storage. I've got cold storage backups for both of these servers, so it's,
Well, what if the power goes out at your house?
well, I know. I mean, these are things we'll have to get figured out, I suppose, but these are all realities. I suppose they're less of a reality when you rely on something like Google, but I think it's worth the sacrifices to get off of
At least
Google.
Bill isn't on PG&E.
And yeah, the power goes out. We'll have about 20 minutes with my APC running.
Get a generator.
Yeah, watch this space. I'm looking into that right now. It's my cousin actually puts them in, and he's offering one of the big ones for well, I won't say, but it's considerably less.
Price.
Yeah.
It's still a lot, but a decent price.
It's a lot, but there's value in being the one guy on the street that's got his house lit up and air conditioners running in the dead of summer,
Okay, well, that about does it for our biweekly wanderings. Let's move on. Linux innards. Today's topic is niche Linux. Today's innards are all about places where Linux works better than anything else. This was easy to know. I think most people know these things, but getting the information together in a good format turned out to be difficult, mostly done by Joe. I also think that even though people know these things, the topic is still interesting and fun to talk about. Most of the topics included here are going to point to the one thing that really makes Linux useful, and that is its scalability. Plus, there are sections of topics that we find interesting. Joe, take it away.
Well, I'm going to start off talking about supercomputers and cluster computers. Linux runs on all the top 500 supercomputers. Formerly, the king of supercomputer OSs was Unix, but the open source nature and scalability of Linux has led to it taking over and dominating that entire market. Many of your early supercomputers ran completely custom Unix OSs. This greatly added to the cost of supercomputing systems in that each OS was unique and designed specifically for a specific set of hardware. You can see where this would add to the overall cost to the point where the software development cost as much as the hardware, and none of it was really reusable. So as things grew, you couldn't just take the code from the old system and move it onto a new system. This led to the trend for supercomputers to run Linux, as developers found using general purpose code to save time and money without having to constantly reinvent the wheel. Linux can be scaled and customized with none of the proprietary tax built in, and because of its nature, can be reused over and over again. You kind of design the hardware specifically for instruction sets and you make it compatible. Everybody can use Linux that way. One thing that you see now amongst many of the supercomputers is multiple lightweight operating systems that can work in conjunction with each other across various nodes, which sounds a lot like cluster computing, and there is a lot of overlap. But this is nodes within the same system that we're talking about at this time. Many of your supercomputer systems have a series of nodes that process independently and then send the output to be put together afterwards. This is controlled by a master scheduler and a series of slave schedulers, which then act as task schedulers and will monitor progress of currently running jobs. Many of your modern supercomputers manage this with Slurm Workload Manager, and that's simple Linux utility for resource management, and it's used by 60% of the top 500 supercomputers. This leads really well into computer clustering. Heck, some of your more famous supercomputers are clusters of other computers put together, but we'll get to that in just a minute. From Wikipedia, a computer cluster is a set of computers that work together so that they can be viewed as a single system. Clusters are usually a series of the same system over and over again that are networked together in close proximity. This allows the sharing of loads and redundancy while being much more cost effective and scalable than a single supercomputer. Now, these computers can be anything in the cluster, from Raspberry Pis to PlayStations to even desktop computers. One of the more famous clusters has to be the Condor Cluster, created by the Air Force, which had more than 1,700 PS3s, which was used to process image data from surveillance drones. This, while being a computer cluster, was also the 35th fastest computer of its time, and for a fraction of the cost of a supercomputer. Each of these machines was running a custom version of, you guessed it, Linux. Multiple different versions of Linux would run on the early versions of the PS3. Now, later on, Sony did come in and make it so that you could no longer load up your own operating system onto the PlayStation through an update. But your older firmwares could load and still can load the Linux operating system. They also actually did this with the PS2 as well, and there were a couple of clusters of that. Now, by the time you got to the PS4, you could no longer do that because the systems were greatly, what's the word I'm looking for, dumbed down essentially to make it so that they just played games and not really had that extra processing power. So they fell out of interest in that way. Now, Beowulf clusters are usually a series of personal computers that are networked together, and I don't want to get too far into that because we could really do a whole nother episode, a whole nother show about it if we wanted. And I already feel like I'm kind of whinging on a bit when it comes to the supercomputer topic. Um, this gets into other connected topics that we could add, such as grid computing or data clustering. But I do want to mention that if you want to try out clustering yourself, and if the price ever comes back down, it is very possible to build a cluster of your own using Raspberry Pis. And yeah, you're kind of limited on what software will run on them, but it still is an interesting project if you have the extra money to spend. Now, I'm not going to say it's cheap because right now pies are like $80 each. I mean, looking at the used market, even 3Bs are selling for like $80 each. So but there are plenty of tutorials online for you to go and look at and pick up how to do it. I have seen boards that are specifically made to cluster the Raspberry Pi zeros, the zero Ws, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to try out something like that, perfect way to do it. Like I said, there are many projects out there for that purpose, but they are limited by the software that they can run. And from my readings, it seems like it would be a very involved project to get started. But that leads pretty well into the next portion. SBC, mini PC, and systems on a chip. Now, for this section, I didn't really do as much research as I should have. I mean, like we said before, one of the things that would be a common theme for this innards was going to be scalability. And now this fits really well into the large computing spaces when you link things together, but it also lends itself to the smaller scale, that scalability of bringing it down into a smaller section. And now from single board computers to mini PCs and systems on a chip, Linux kind of dominates that market as well. And IoT would not be a thing without Linux.
Real quick, I'm sorry, just to bump in. It can't be overstated how much Linux would dominate just in terms of scalability, because you can take Linux, and you can remove components from it, and you still have a working system. You try doing that with Windows, and the whole thing just kind of falls over. So that's another advantage that we have, is you can literally strip down Linux. I mean, you can literally strip components out of the kernel itself as you're compiling, just to have the absolute bare minimum things that you need, and you still have a working system, which makes it an obvious choice for these
Yep.
SBCs.
Now, IoT is at present one of the more interesting platforms for Linux innovation, given its low cost and diminished operating carbon footprint. Many ARM devices can perform comparable tasks while utilizing a fraction of that power consumption. A lot of your mini PCs are just like the larger computers, so many of them do run Windows, but a lot of them, out of the box, will run Linux. Now, when it comes to single board computers, nearly all of them run Linux of one kind or another, but some of them will also run other operating systems out of the box. But when you think about SBC, things like the Raspberry Pi and the BagelBone come to mind, and will generally do better as Linux devices, since, like Bill said, the kernel can be pared down to the bare minimum and the operating system can be optimized for that specific device. Same with mini PCs. They are more useful for longer as Linux devices. Windows, over time, it grows bigger, it takes up more space, it just will run slower on older systems. Linux, because it can be pared down, because you can only add in the things that you need to use, it's going to work better on those older small systems. Now, when it comes to systems on a chip, look at things like cell phones. All of your Android phones use that Linux kernel. Um, I would like to see more, actual like Linux phones, but I understand that that's not going to happen anytime soon because there isn't enough development to make it, usable as a daily driver. Now, from what I've been able to find, according to the Open Mobile Alliance, 72% of IoT devices use some form of embedded Linux, and you do get some BSD, which is also open source, tossed in there, and Amazon's free Ertos, which is also somewhat common. It's also open source, and Linux still reigns supreme with its scalability and security in the IoT space. There is a lot of developers that develop for Linux, and this makes for a lot of code and a lot of people with eyes on glass to see where those vulnerabilities are and get them closed. That's one of the things that makes IoT much more secure than it would be otherwise in using Linux, as long as the companies that are making these IoT devices are actually, providing updates. And then I was going to let Bill talk about the server space.
Yeah, servers. This might not be the most interesting part of the Linux story, but it is the part that is probably what is going to keep us alive over the long haul, because when it comes to servers, Linux just dominates. According to webtribunal.net, 96.3% of the world's top 1 million servers run Linux, as well as 90% of the world's cloud infrastructure. And the reasons for that are somewhat obvious when you think about it. Linux makes more sense in the server space due to the relative simplicity as well as lower operating costs. Corporations can set up web servers, file share servers, and the like using open source software and take advantage of community maintained software. For better or worse, Linux is likely the popular choice due to its decreased cost. It's because of this cloud computing is as lucrative as it is, because oftentimes the operating system employed by the BPSs are FOSS. Therefore, the only operating cost is from hardware and infrastructure. It's very likely that your business has if your business has a website, it is being hosted on a VPS hyperscaler like Amazon Web Service, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. These services maximize profits by leaning their infrastructure on Linux and open source software.
I'm going to jump in right there again. sorry if you cover this a little bit later, but it does need to be mentioned. Once again, it's the exact same thing. There are developers that are out there making
Yeah.
this happen with Linux, and every day they're improving it, and those improvements are available to these companies for a minimal cost. Now, I have watched over years of working in the industry as people moved away from Windows and moved away from, well, even Linux like or Unix like systems, and moved into just using raw Linux, moved away from AIX, moved away from Solaris, moved into just using Linux, and moved away from Windows Server, thank God. But yeah, and just using Linux. And so, yes, companies are making massive amounts of money, and it's all on the back of Linux.
Yeah. And many of the huge cloud service providers are, in fact, huge open source contributors in terms of code and other support. A Linux on the server just makes more sense because of the versatility of the system. You have many more choices as to the components used to make a server work. A WordPress web server, for example, like what we use for mintCast.org, is comprised of three main types of software, which is supplemental to the operating system, meaning these are things that have to be installed after the operating system is installed. You have to have a web server such as Apache or Nginx to run the necessary web host. You have to have a database server such as MySQL, MariaDB, MongoDB, Postgres SQL, InfluxDB, depending on the type of data and the way it needs to be aggregated and then served to the applications. Each one of these servers works better for one thing than another. And then you need a scripting language such as PHP, which is used to execute the tasks. For example, Nextcloud uses PHP a lot to run the executables, to show the content on the screen, or to run the document servers. There's code being executed just like any other application that you would have installed on your system. The varieties and combinations of these bits of software can be elegantly packaged together to create the tailored web experience that is essential for whatever unique tasks a business needs tools for. A business selling t-shirts, for example, online would have very different needs from one that catalogs technical documentations and needs to provide a way to make that information available to potential customers. The right combination of the different components can optimize the user experience and make for a more cohesive commercial offering. Oftentimes, a server will need to be set up on, let's say, a cloud server to convey temporary information about an event. Now, here's something important about the cost aspect, or something like that, which will not need to have an operating website after the conclusion of the event. Like if you've got a event going on for a week or something, and then once it's over with, there's no point in having the website up advertising the event. This is another use case where Linux makes more sense because a web server can be spun up, the website built, used for the appropriate amount of time, and then shut down. Many cloud providers only charge based on total time a server is up, making Linux the obvious choice, given it can be set up and shut down with no additional cost. There's no license fee for the operating system, so there's no disadvantage to scrapping the system after it's no longer needed. And you've got a lot of that going on. You've got a lot of servers being set up to run a specific task, or a core device being set up to run a specific task and then scrapped, sometimes within a day. And you imagine doing that with Windows, where you've got to get a license every time you do things like this.
That's basically where Linode makes all their money.
Exactly. Yeah, because with Linode, you can set it up, run it, and you're basically just going to be charged based on the amount of time the servers are up. And then that's all kind of all added up, and then associated to your account, and then you're charged for that. And that's I mean, I can't think of a better way to make money on that. So yeah, I run several servers right here within 2 feet of me right now. I've got an Ubuntu server 2204 running a few things. This machine right here, it's got the stickers on it. Much of it is on Docker. It's running a few things, including a Jellyfin server that's running in a Docker container, which is a media server, not unlike Plex. Plex has got a little bit more functionality, but it's got a nice Netflix style, I'd say. That's what people usually say, right? Netflix style interface for all of my locally installed media. I have this server internet facing so that I can share my media collection with friends. Moss, for example, sometimes connects to my Jellyfin to watch some of the stuff I've got on there. This machine also has an Nginx reverse proxy manager running in a Docker container, which is important because in order to have that Jellyfin server internet facing and have other stuff internet facing, because I've also got the Nextcloud machine over here running. I've only got one IP address coming into the house. So once it gets into the house, a reverse proxy is the thing that does the job of saying, okay, this traffic needs to go to this server, this traffic needs to go to this server. And that way I can resolve several, if the limit is just basically in the functionality of the machines themselves. Well, there goes Joe. When you run a Nginx reverse proxy manager, it handles the SSL stuff for you in terms of the necessary certificates. So I don't have to worry about the certificates for the traffic coming into the website. I do have to still handle some SSL between Nextcloud, for example, needs its own layer of SSL between that server and the reverse proxy. So it's probably not the best way to handle it, but what I usually do is I just forward the port temporarily to that machine, run certbot, get a certificate, and then forward the port back to the reverse proxy. That's just the easiest way to deal with that. The proper way would be to set up a certificate authority on the reverse proxy and then put that certificate into the Nextcloud and then make it like a 5-year certificate or something. But with my method, all I have to do is get on there once every couple of months and renew the certificate, and I'm golden. That also needs a MariaDB database, which itself is a Docker container. The only thing that does is provide the minimum sort of database that reverse proxy needs. But this machine, it runs those things, and that's usually, it's a pretty beefy machine. It could probably do a lot more, but I'm really not pushing it beyond that, except it is running the WireGuard connection that I use when I'm tunneling back into the home network. So when I'm on the road, which is quite a bit, and I need to access to the home system, that is the way I do it, and it works gloriously. This is useful when I need to solve problems on the network, or if I need to do some kind of update, or I need to do a reboot, or whatever. I can solve problems easily no matter where I'm at. Now, the machine that I was talking about that Moss helped me order and get set up to some degree, that's running Ubuntu Server 2204, and that's running our mintCast Nextcloud server, which we may switch to for our documentation in the future. Replacing
mintCloud Nextcast?
mintCloud Nextcast. Yeah. This server configuration includes Apache for the web server, MariaDB for the database, and PHP for the scripting language. Those are all the things that are the default method of installing Nextcloud. I got a tutorial from learnlinux.tv. He's got an excellent blog post that just walks you through the whole process of setting. I could have done the snap install Nextcloud route, but then you got to do a little, it feels really hacky when you want to use a separate device for the data directory. So I just built it from the ground up myself. That way I know where everything is and how to fix problems. But that's running fantastically too. Now, the only other thing I'm running right now is a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, and that's running Raspberry Pi OS. And the only job it's got is the Pi-hole DNS sinkhole, which provides network level ad and tracker blocking to whatever devices are connected to it as a DNS server. Users that are connected to it can surf the web and perform tasks with the added advantage of websites cleaned from ads and other tracking software that utilize DNS for their metrics. When I connect to my home network, and here's another cool thing, if I connect to my home network with that WireGuard connection that I was talking about earlier, even when I'm on my laptop or my phone, I have the added benefit of that ad blocking running remotely. So I can surf the web without worrying about ads. And it can, when you're on the road, it's kind of nice because you're charged. Well, you're not really charged. Verizon gives me like 10 gigabytes of tethering, because that's how I usually do it. I tether my laptop to my phone, and the ads are probably not a heck of a lot, but every little bit helps, to make that stretch out a little bit more. But yeah, that when it comes to the servers, like I said, it's probably not the most interesting thing that Linux is used for, but it is the thing that is going to, in my opinion, keep us relevant to the degree that you will have the expectation of seeing Linux available for normal people on normal machines for the foreseeable future. So I think, and that's why I really kind of paid a lot of attention to it, because in my opinion, it's a very important task that Linux fulfills. But that being said, the most important thing, the most interesting thing, I think, is what Moss is going to talk about. So take
Linux
it away.
In space.
Yay. My Schwartz is bigger than yours.
On July 30th, 2020, NASA launched the Mars 2020 spacecraft, an Atlas V541 rocket carrying the Perseverance rover, nicknamed Percy. It was sent to Mars to look for and collect signs of past microbial life, cache rock and soil samples, and perhaps pave the way for future human exploration on the red planet. Included with the land-based rover is the Ingenuity, nicknamed Ginny, a small robotic helicopter designed by JPL. To date, this impressive aircraft has conducted 33 flights. The planet's atmospheric density is about 1/100th that of Earth's at sea level, or about the same as at 87,000 feet, or 27,000 meters, an altitude never reached by existing helicopters. And there is about 2.66 times less gravity. Further, the current flights are being made in the middle of the Martian winter, where JPL engineers were amazed to learn there was just enough sun to repower the solar batteries to continue conducting missions. 1 flight already this week and 4 more scheduled for this month. Temperatures on Mars during winter get down to minus 220 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 140 Celsius, and the equipment is still working. The reason we mention it here is because this impressive little aircraft is powered entirely by Linux. The craft operates on a Snapdragon 801 processor boasting a 2.2 gigahertz clock, which is in fact more powerful than the processors on Percy. The Ingenuity has proven an enormous success, given it was only originally intended to perform about 5 flights, with altitudes ranging from 3 to 5 meters for up to 90 seconds each. The maximum altitude is 12 meters. On the helicopter's 25th flight, it made a record-breaking 2,310 feet, 712 meters, which is now considered its maximum range. They didn't think it could go that far before that. At a maximum of 10 meters per second, 22 miles per hour. To accomplish this, the rotors have to rotate at 2,400 to 2,700 RPM, which is 10 times faster than they would have to rotate on Earth. This is all quite impressive, given all the flight instructions have to be scripted, giving the distance between Earth and Mars and the time it takes for radio signals to reach the craft. For more information on Ingenuity, see the link in the show notes. Some interesting highlights of other NASA/JPL projects. Many of the CubeSat missions used Linux in their flight controllers, including the Alto 1. TacSat-1, a microsatellite, used Linux in a couple of its computer systems. A couple of satellites have used Android phones as onboard computers, such as the Strand 1. The Lightsail 1, another CubeSat that used Tyvak and Tripit V6 SBC that used Linux. And SpaceX heavily uses Linux in all of their flights to resupply the space station in order to tap the huge developer community for the environment and for the ability to use off-the-shelf parts. They use Linux and the primary flight computers for the Dragon spacecraft and several of their other vehicles.
I'm not sure it's completely fair for we in the Linux space to take all the credit for this.
Oh yeah, we can.
I'm gonna do it anyway. Because this is probably, I mean, when they announced this, and then anybody that listens to this show probably listens to the Jupiter broadcasting shows as well, and they actually had some JPL people. Well, one guy from JPL on the show at some point when this whole thing first broke, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah, they're tickled pink to talk about the Linux of the project.
And in fact, I think this week they are at JPL, so I'll be eagerly anticipating their shows, talking to the people there. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, right? Obviously, I think in the past they would have used something like Solaris or something along that lines, and it, I guess that's just not what it used to be, and they had to do work to make Linux a good option for this to work well. But the fact is that they were able to use Linux and make it work for the payloads, the workloads that they had going on. And
I think it's incredible that they can fly a helicopter on Mars using an SoC that's probably a little less powerful than what's in your phone.
And old. I think it's pretty old too. But that's another thing.
And the rover uses an even older, less powerful one.
I mean, it just goes to
then
we went to the moon on floppy disks. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I love that people are making satellites that run on cell phones. I mean, doing the research, they even have cell phones taking pictures of the Earth. And so it really says that you could make your own rocket at home and send it up there and have it do awesome things.
Yeah, the hard part is the rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was saying I don't know if it's fair to take all the credit, but we'll do it anyway, and then whatever. But that's cool, and I look forward to more of this kind of stuff in the future, just knowing that Linux is the thing that, or open source, is the thing. The free sharing of ideas is the concept that dominates in the space where the ideas really matter, where, the metal hits the meat, stuff like this. It's one of the first technologies being put forth to further our understanding of Mars, which is no doubt we're in the pioneering days of discovering the universe beyond where we live right now, and I think that's important that we're a part of that. So
yay. Well, that about wraps up our Linux enters for this episode. Let's move on. And we apparently don't have any vibrations or check this out. So let's move on to housekeeping. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like us to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post to the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at http://mint. That should be https://mintcast.org. Next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, October 16th, and we have a link to get mintCast converted to your time zone. Our next live stream, it will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on October 8th, and we have a link to convert that to your time zone. Our next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time, October 22nd, and we have a link to convert that to your time zone. And our live stream information is found at mintcast.org/livestream. Wrapping up, Joe, where can we find you?
Well, you can catch me on a couple other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show. That's tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast. That's linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Moss?
Well, you can find me every week on Full Circle Weekly News, every month on Distro Hoppers Digest. My email is bardmoss@pm.me, and my other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
Well, you can email me at bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord, at WC Hauser3 on Twitter, WC Hauser3 on Facebook as well. And check out my other podcast, Three Fat Truckers. The website is 3ftpodcast.org.
And Norbert, who couldn't be with us today, can be reached norbert@mintcast.org. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Norbert, Londoner, Tony H., and all others for our audio editing. And we still need help there if you'd like to volunteer. Josh Lowe and Bill Hauser for all his work on the website. All their work on the website. Hobstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs. Bill for our Linode, which runs our website. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Excellent day.
And it's a wrap, and we've got a minute 50. Hour 50, sorry.
Thanks for watching, folks.
Yeah, it was a shorter show.